Time for another DraftPhysics.com video presentation. DebatePhysics.com also, but no one will show up and debate any of these subjects in any kind of rational debate forum where, like, I make an argument and then they accept my argument and then counter it with a counter argument. No, that can't happen apparently. So, I did notice a couple things in the dispar lever thing, so I guess we'll get to that. I'll just point out that he has these other previous videos with his little Matchbox cars, and he claims he is launching them perfectly. That is, they have the same energy collection, and and this is somehow the perfect launching device. It's a frickin' toy, okay? A plastic, crappy, rubber band-driven toy. And he's basically arguing that he has some reason to believe it's not only a quick release, but that it contacts the cars perfectly and it pushes them perfectly. I mean, it's just nonsense. So I didn't even bother because it's just such nonsense. God damn. Anyway, so back to this experiment where he's creating free momentum now with the lever, which I didn't think somebody was going to claim was possible. Now, I could argue that if you put it in gravity, if you shoot your object with more momentum in gravity, it's going to come back down with more momentum, and then you're going to have a real problem in terms of creating more momentum on the other side, and so that's not going to work. But anyway, so the point is, my argument is there's a flaw in his setup. So let's jump to the that something has to be wrong with what he's done. And the one thing I did notice, okay, I think you can see it. Yes, you can. So he has the cars going by just one side of the photo gate, and in the two examples, the car going in, it's blocking the opposite side. So there's a side that is the light bulb, and then there's the side that's the photoresistor that's collecting the light, the photodiode. And the idea is you want, I'm sure the thing is designed for the car to go in the middle. So regardless, you can improve its accuracy to some extent. I mean, the numbers won't be accurate, but the consistency will be more consistent if you do run the card in front of the light or in front of the diode. But the two things are going to be different. And so the fact that the incoming car, he has the card next to the diode, let's say, and on the outgoing car, he has the card on the side of the light emitter. So that isn't a consistency, that's an inconsistency. So maybe he's getting very wrong results in terms of his timings because of that change he made to how the device is supposed to be used. And one could argue that when he does the case with the two equal mass cars, they're actually way off, like 10% or more. In terms of their velocities, and he's reading it as the same velocity even though it's way off, and that's why in the subsequent experiment he's got way too much momentum being collected, being read on the device, because the devices aren't reading the same because of that obvious flaw, in the sense that the two photo gates should be arranged the same way for both the incoming and the outgoing. Having them arranged opposite each other is probabilistically not a good idea. Maybe it doesn't matter, but I think it does. So anyway, that might be a cause. Can't say for sure. Nobody, surprisingly, has commented on the video because the results are so, who knows what you're saying. I mean, they're not decisive for anything. They're more noise experiments proving a non-existent theory. Alright, so then on the other subject, the Ian Gosling claim that he has some explanation for how combining things or exchanging energy is somehow taxed by the universe, that things can't exchange energy. They have to lose energy to exchange energy, some kind of rule like that. Completely made up physics. I mean, it doesn't have anything to do with the arguments actual physicists make. So I could play video where physics girl says the word deformation or heat, and I can play a video where physicist Michael says deformation or heat. Okay, that the loss of kinetic energy was to some real loss in the environment. You can measure it. It's a measurable loss, not a magical loss, of a measurable loss. And he's claiming an unmeasurable magical loss, which, again, is nonsense. Now, clearly it's nonsense to say you can conserve the momentum and create heat. You really can't do that. Okay. You can't create movement in any other part of the universe if you want to exchange the energy between one object and another. So if you end up perfectly exchanging the momentum, you can't do work somewhere else. Not possible. Anyway, so in that vein, the White Henry guy has actually made a comment where he explains that yes, it's just an exchange, and you have to explain how the exchange costs energy, because there's no reasoning or logic that provides an explanation for that loss. And then I've pointed out, so I'll just illustrate some of this other stuff, the arguments that have been ignored, as is often the case. To the stupid people like Piro and such, who, haven't really thought about it, and then they claim, oh, I have such a new brilliant perspective, and it's just crap as a perspective. So, I mean, I did this experiment, the coupled oscillator. We have a simple scenario. You have two pendulums, and all you have to do is create some kind of connection between them, some loose connection, and that as they swing they'll pull on each other a little bit, so you can change how quickly or slowly this oscillator moves the motion from this side to this side. And again, it happens completely. All the energy goes over here, then all the energy is in this pendulum, then all the energy goes to this pendulum. So it's showing you exchanges, and again, it'll go on for many cycles, dozens of cycles. So the energy stays in the system, but there's very little loss. They're just simple pendulums, and so you're not losing much of the energy, and it's clearly showing there's no tax for exchanging energy. You can put the energy in a heavy thing, then you can put it back in a light thing, then you can put it in a heavy thing, then you put it in a light thing. And again, it's a very good argument against kinetic energy, because the momentum is, the MV is conserved here. Now, I can't prove that, but I'm just saying, what's your alternative explanation? That there's 200 joules when the energy is over here, and there's only 100 joules when the energy is over here? Is that really going to be your explanation? That it puts 200 on this, when this thing's moving it's 200 joules, when this thing's moving it's only 100 joules, and then it goes back on this side, it's 200 joules again. I mean, is that realistically going to be your argument? You're really going to argue something like that? Alright, so another example I thought of, I didn't give it much thought, but back to the spaceship argument. And so let's say I throw something out, okay, a light mass with a kinetic energy, and I have a string tied to it, and as it goes out, it's going to be connected to another mass of the same mass. So it's a one mass. Alright, I shoot it out, there's a string connected to it, and so it is going to have a velocity here, v initial, and it's going to now be combined, in the sense it's going to now pull the other object. And what are we going to end up with realistically? We're going to end up with an oscillator, but what's it going to be oscillating at? Well, it's going to be oscillating at half the velocity. So if I actually, let's say if I did it with a rubber band, this one will absorb the energy, this one will pull, and this one will stop, this one will go. It's a coupled oscillator. So it'll end up doing that all the way as it moves. So one of them will move, the other one will stop. One of them will move, the other one will stop. You can sort of understand that that's going to end up being half the velocity. That the distance the whole system will travel will be half in the same amount of time, because it's half of it's not moving half the time. And then if I made it a more strict pull, something non-elastic, then you could just sort of understand that this will have to share its velocity with this new mass, and it's just going to cut the velocity in half. But I can't destroy the momentum that's in there. It's not, you can't get rid of any of it. There's nowhere to lose it to heat or deformation or any of that nonsense. So what I'm really going to be doing is just basically saying, yes, this is twice the mass now. It's being moved by the same velocity I started with, v1. That's the only velocity I have, is the initial velocity. And now it has to move twice the mass, and it's going to move twice the mass at 1/2 the velocity, quite obviously. That's what's going to happen in space. And I don't think they can rationally dispute that's exactly what's going to happen. This will not stop. It will not do any of these things implying that somehow exchanges, giving your energy to something. A bowling ball hits the bowling pins. None of the energy is lost. Some of it goes to heat. Some of it goes to sound. Some of it moves surfaces. Even when you move a surface, it doesn't keep moving. It ends up stopping because there's friction, and so it ends up being converted into heat. And all of this can be understood as what you're really saying is you can have big things move in the universe, but if they move near other matter, okay, that the other matter is got little bits on it, and all you're really going to do is convert the motion in the big thing, and you're going to create little motions in the small things. So, and heat is ultimately the smallest motion. That's when you've taken it from moving little bits of rocks around, and they hit each other, and then they stop because they heat up. Okay, and then they just transfer it into something even smaller, which is the heat. So the heat's like the smallest thing you can convert. Not really in the screen, but that's all right. So you're really just saying that that's all you're doing, is you're just taking motion in a big thing and losing it to the motion in a bunch of little tiny things. But it's always somewhere, as Feynman would say. You can't destroy the motion in the universe. It's always somewhere. There's a history to every single thing that moves in the universe. It got its motion through an interaction where it exchanged velocity with something. There's no other way to acquire it. You have to have contact. Something contacts you, a force or another material object, and you, okay, exchange your condition with its condition, and become saturated, okay, with its condition. Whether the condition is the rain of gravity, you get wet from the rain of gravity, the force, or something actually just hits you, okay, and it has the disease of this way, and it's going to give you some of its disease. It's really so simple, and they've turned it into such garbage and nonsense. Alright, so is there anything else to comment on? I left a comment on a Warbles on a lot video, because he's fireproofing his dump, his trailer park, and in my opinion, he's just doing it the wrong way. I mean, the most expensive way possible. Because the dynamics he's protecting against are not going to be controllable. And so you want something that's pretty much guaranteed to give you the 15 minutes that you need of heat resistance. Well, anyway, so I'm basically saying he should just tarp his little village. Just buy some really good metallic tarps. Just tarp everything, and then just let the fire pass over it, because all that stuff won't burn, and the ground around those things are not burnable, so they're not going to endure that much. and there's no way for a spark to ignite anything or any of that crap to happen, blah 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 blah. And I really like to argue that, but you know, that's a lot mushier physics. The physics of forest fires. It's sort of interesting because a huge difference between a brush fire and a forest fire. Huge difference between when the trees are part of the fuel and when you just have a bunch of grasses and stuff like that burning. One of them moves really fast, the other one doesn't move so fast, and the whole point of the wind driving it and all of that kind of crap. But anyway, no point in going into it, but I went into it. That's what I'll do, is that much of it. It's I think it's an interesting subject, but he didn't want to hear anything about it, so he wrote a whole long bunch of stuff telling me I'm wrong, in the sense that there's no fireproof tarps. By fireproof I was just meaning as fireproof as you can make them. There certainly are ones that are very fire resistant and heat resistant, but anyway, so he's just he wants to defend what he's doing, and then he told me to fuck off and all that kind of crap. So it was just kind of funny how hostile he was. But he has these, solar panels on the roof of cars. I mean, it's just, he has a lot of wacky ideas, frankly. Some of good ideas, but it's just mixed. He's 50-50, and you have to be smart enough to know which 50 is which 50. But anyway, it doesn't really matter. And there was some other thing to comment on. Physicist Michael's making some pulley video, which, who cares? Yes, because that mechanics is kind of obvious. It still isn't what they say. I mean, force isn't about displacement. It just happens when you're working in gravity. It is. But in all the other circumstances, it doesn't have anything to do with displacement. You're not going to get right answers using displacement. You're going to get right answers understanding that gravity is a time-dependent force. But anyway, and most other forces are just about the higher the velocity, the shorter the amount of time the event takes place in. The slower the velocity, the longer the amount of time the interaction takes. That kind of simple mechanics defines the reality. He's almost implying in his video, he does make a statement where he's talking about the force changing. The force doesn't change. It's just how long you're applying the total force. So yes, you're taking more time to apply a force, but forces are complete things. They're not partial things. There's no partial amount of force. There's just different lengths of time for its application. High pressure for a short period of time, low pressure for a long period of time. Not that complicated. Anyway, I think that's maybe I'll just pause and make sure there's just thoughts that went through my head, blah blah blah. It's really enough. I mean, the videos I made had all of the detail. I mean, I went through all of these examples, pool balls, all kinds of different examples, explaining how you just can't make this argument that that exchanging your momentum with something else is somehow complicated. It isn't. There's nothing complicated about it. It's just, strictly speaking, you just give it away like it's money. It's a commodity. You have momentum, and you can just give away pieces of it any way you want to, and there's no taxing of giving away momentum. Alright, you have $10, you give away 5, you still have 5. Not complicated. Alright, so till the next time and such, so forth and whatnot.